Great. So hello, everyone, here at the top of the hour. It's morning for me, but wherever you are, it might be a different time. And I see Pateka has already helped us out by getting started in the chat. And so I'd love to have each person go ahead and say something in the chat, perhaps introduce yourself, and as was already demonstrated, where are you calling in from today? Hello, Library Development from South Carolina. Do you have a name? Okay, Carolyn, I'll go ahead and rename you because I do have the power to do that. There you go. If anyone else needs to be renamed, let me know and I can do that. Looks like everyone else is here as an actual person though. Wonderful. Great to see so many people who I know from IFLA and from the various committees and conferences and presentations all over the years. And great to see, is it Peter from Kazakhstan? Our upcoming host for the WILIC 2025 conference. That's very exciting. Looking forward to that. Okay, so it looks like we've managed to get everyone set up with the chat. And we'll just go ahead and be informal about this as we work through this today. So let me go ahead and introduce myself for this webinar today, which is titled From Knowledge to Action, Skills for Impactful Training, Design, and Delivery. My name is Lisa Janicke Hinchliffe, and as I mentioned, I recognize a number of your names, so it's exciting to see some friends and colleagues here. I am a librarian at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in the United States. Currently a member of the Professional Council of IFLA, serving Division B as their division coordinator, but have previous experience with the Committee on Standards, the Information Literacy section, which I was chair of, as well as the section on education training, where I was most recently the secretary. I've also done a lot of work with the Copyright and Legal Matters Committee, and just had a chance to be at the library the IFLA regional division meeting in Latin America and Caribbean region just 2 weeks ago. So really great to have so many chances to engage. This is a workshop that is part of IFLA's Building Capacity for Impact initiative. And I want to thank and acknowledge SIGL, the supporting funder for this training. So I think we've gotten almost everyone logged in as well. Oh, Chris, great to see one of my own colleagues. So great, excellent, excellent. So we've got everyone logged in here, and that's really important because I wanted to make sure that as we got started and had everyone here, we do a little bit of testing with the technology today. So the first thing we've figured out is that indeed you can all type into the chat, so that is excellent. The next thing I'm going to do is we're going to be using a worksheet today, and that worksheet is available to you as a Google Doc. And the reason this, I've put it into Google Doc is because it gives you a chance to type as we're going if you want. And at the end, when you submit it, it will send you your answers. No less, you can go ahead and submit it as you're working on it. And over the course of time in your email, you'll get a link where you can log in to make future edits. Now, I just want to say that this Google form is an option for you. It is also fine if you just want to take notes as we go through the workshop. But I know some people find it nice to be able to fill out a form and have everything already typed up. So it's an option for you. We're going to be doing a series of things to think about during this workshop. Now, before you came to this workshop today, you were asked to think about what kind of training you might develop for a given audience in a 60 to 90-minute session. And so just if you bring that to mind right now, that'll be really great because that'll be the first thing that you're going to have. But let's review the workshop goals for today. So after today's webinar, you will be prepared to design effective training and programs by analyzing audience needs, establishing clear learning goals, and selecting appropriate teaching methods. You'll also be prepared to actually deliver engaging learning experiences by organizing content effectively, selecting appropriate teaching materials, and creating relevant learning materials. And then finally, we'll have a section on how to evaluate and improve your training effectiveness by identifying suitable evaluation methods, designing authentic assessments, and incorporating feedback for improvement. So we're really walking through a set of skills that have some knowledge behind them, but the goal is that you end today's workshop with literally a draft of the design that you're going to have for your 60 to 90-minute session. I am very comfortable with Zoom and teaching and monitoring a chat, so I want to invite you to put questions and comments in the chat as we go through today's session. If I can answer them kind of in the moment, I will. And if there's anything that I know is upcoming or I need to put off for whatever reason, I'll go ahead and ask your indulgence in going ahead and just putting you off for a moment. But I promise you that by the time we end our session today, we'll have addressed all of your questions. You'll also have the opportunity to follow up with me via email if you need to. Okay, does everyone able to access the Google form if they were interested in doing so? Okay, looks like we are all set to go then. All right, let's get going. So we've already actually done our welcome and introductions. So thank you so much for that. We're going to dive right into program design then. Oh, I guess I did introduce myself, but you'll get these slides later and there's a lot more about me here if you ever want to know more. We've already done the worksheet as well. So here's the big picture of program design that we're going to be working with today. And this is called a program logic model, and it was articulated by the Kellogg Foundation, which is a philanthropy within the United States that funds a lot of nonprofit work. It gives grants to not-for-profit organizations to create social benefit in organizations' communities. What does the logic model do for us? It puts the entire design of a program on a single page. And when I say a program, it can be as big as, revolutionizing the healthcare in a community and as small as a single 60-minute workshop. But what it does is it helps us understand what is the need we are meeting in our community. What are the resources that we have to meet that need? And what are the activities we'll do in order to meet that need? And when we do those activities, what will happen for our community? How will they engage with us? That's the outputs. What will they gain from engaging from us? That's the outcomes. And finally, what will happen in their lives as a result of that engagement? Now, with training, this gets a little bit simpler in the sense that we know there's a need, there's a learning need, and that's our motivation for offering the training. And then we've got resources at hand, ourselves, materials we create, resources from the profession. And with that, we do activities. And the primary activity we do is we offer the training. Now, the output is people attend the training. Hopefully, as many people attend the training as we intended, but sometimes not. And when they attend that training, they learn something, and that's the outcome. And then because they learned something, there's an impact in their lives. There's a change in their profession. There's a change in how they do their work. So we've got our motivation, which is the learning need. We've got the work we're going to do, and we've got what we intend to have happen as a result of that work. Make some sense? Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. The first thing we have is I want to talk about the structure if you're designing a 60-minute training program. So whatever our topic is, it has to be scoped to something that can be taught within 60 minutes. And so, we're not going to teach people everything they need to know about cataloging in 60 minutes. We're going to teach them some specific subtopic. And that's true no matter what the topic is that we're training on. And what I've done on this slide is literally just give you what it looks like if you have a 60-minute training session. You've got an introduction and a conclusion, so that's going to take a few minutes of your time. And then essentially you have 3 15 to 20-minute time slots. And this is probably one of the most important things I can tell you about designing training sessions, which is to think in 20-minute blocks. So we've got the first 20-minute block, which is the intro and your first set of content. Then we've got the second 20-minute block, and then we've got the third 20-minute block that needs to include your conclusion. So what we can see when we then look at a 90-minute training program is it's quite similar in the sense of thinking in these 20-minute blocks. It's just that we get 4 20-minute blocks when we're doing a 90-minute session rather than just 3. So the first question for you to sort of have in your mind, and hopefully you came with this today, is what is the topic you are training for? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot there's this slide here that just compares these two, so that lets you see that. So what is the topic you're training for? And specifically, what do your learners need to know about this topic? So first, we need to think about the audience that you're training for. What is it that you know about them? Who are they? You might say things like, well, they're reference librarians who work in my library, or they're information literacy librarians who work in this particular country. So for target audience, we're just looking for sort of one phrase descriptor that says who the audience is that you're providing training for. And this is really important because what, say, the professional librarians who work the reference desk might need in training is very different than if you were training library school students or undergraduate students who work alongside the librarians. So we need to have a really clear sense in our mind of who we are training. So if you're working through the Google form, you've got a chance already to go ahead and put your target audience in. If you're not, just go ahead and take notes on a sheet of paper as you're working through, and you can always fill out that form later. A little bit more detailed, though, is for us to think about their background. What do the people I'm training already know about this topic? And also, how similar are my participants to each other? Do I have an audience for my training that has a very similar background? Or are they coming with lots of different backgrounds? So when I was looking over, for example, who was attending this workshop series, we have some people who are coming with very little experience in public speaking, teaching, training. And we have other people who are coming with a number of years of experience in these areas. So I had to think about a set of participants in this training that is very diverse. Lots of different degrees of experience and background. So I'm going to pause and give you a moment to think about the background for your target audience. Now, this is always much more challenging for me when I'm doing training online because I can't see your writing or your typing. So, as we're working through this, if you have questions or need me to give you a little bit more time, please speak up in the chat so that we can make sure that this is going at a pace that's working for everyone. So, the other thing we need to think about is what do our participants already know about the topic? And so, in other words, how do we figure out what we can count on them knowing? And the big thing that's going to help with here that helps us understand why we need to think about this is a learning theory that is called constructivism. And constructivism is a learning theory that says the way people learn is they take in new information, but they combine it with what they already know. And then they interpret that new information and those learning experiences given what they already know. So, what do people already know about the topic that you're training on? And what is their attitude about that topic? Are they excited to learn about this topic? Are they anxious? Are they resentful? Have they been asking for it? So that's more of the attitudinal. The knowledge is, do they know anything? What do they know? If they don't really know much about the topic, what do they know about related topics? What can you count on them already knowing when they come to your training? So here's the one thing I can always count on when people come to my training about training, which is they have been trained. They have been a learner at some point. In fact, they probably were a learner for years in elementary school, secondary school, college, university. We have tons of years of experience being learners, even if we have very limited experience being teachers. So I know that I have a lot to draw on in what you've experienced as learners, even if you haven't had a whole lot of experience as trainers. So with that, thinking about what they already know, we can then ask ourselves, well, what do they need to know? What do they need to know about this topic that you're training them on? So let me pause for a moment and let you again take a few notes about what they need to know. So we've gotten a start of what people need to know here. Ah, yes, it can be very useful as well, as you work through this, to think about how this is going to help you communicate about why people might want to attend the training. Because we're getting good clarity on what people are going to learn in the training and thus why it would be useful to them. Excellent point. So on this next slide, I'm going to just give us another tool to think a little bit deeper about what we want people to learn. Because learning can be seen as a change in a lot of different things. It can be a change in what we're aware of. So our training might be aimed at creating awareness. But our training could also be aimed at changing people's knowledge. It could also be aimed at improving people's skills. Training could be aimed at adjusting people's attitudes. And it could also have the goal of changing their behaviors outside of the training environment. So look back at what you just wrote down that people need to know from your training, what they need to learn, and maybe amend that a little bit based on maybe using these words here. That, what are you going for? Are you going for a change in knowledge, a change in skill, a change in attitude, a change in behavior on the job? I was recently talking with somebody who said that they really needed their librarians to start doing something on the job. And so we started talking about, well, what could the training be? And I finally asked, I said, it sounds to me like you're telling me that people already know what they're supposed to do and they know how to do it. It's just that they're not doing it. So that is training that has to look at attitude, not skill. They have the skill. They're just not using it because they're against it. And that's a very different kind of training session to create, probably much more dialogue about why this is important and what the barriers are, as opposed to skill training, which is building people's ability to follow procedures and implement steps. So this helps us start to clarify what the actual learning need is. So let me give you a moment to do a little revision if you need to. And at this point, you now should have filled out all three of these. You should have a notion of who your intended target audience is. You would have information on the background that you assume that they're coming from. And you would have some articulation of what the learning needs are. Everyone tracking along on this? Anyone have any questions? Because this is really foundational to everything we're going to do next. We're going to have to keep coming back to these as our touch points. And I should mention, if you're sending something in the chat, you may want to make sure that you've chosen everyone and not just host, because otherwise I'm the only one who will see your chat. So. Hey, Megan, thank you. Multiple training goals for the training. Yes, it is fine to have multiple goals, and we'll get to restating these needs into goals in a second. We have to think about how many goals we can have for the amount of time we have. So you saw that for this 2-hour session, I had 3 outcomes for our workshop training today. It would probably be unreasonable to think that we were going to have like 10 or 14 for a 2-hour training. But if we were teaching a training that was over multiple weeks, multiple sessions, we might have some overall training goals, and then we might have individual goals for each session. I think, Katie, that you probably want to have sort of one. I'm having a little bit. I'm trying to parse this a little bit, like a focus area. So we want a topic, and within that topic, there can be more than one aim. So you might need to have people both develop a skill and be motivated to apply it. If that's what you're getting at, going back to this chart here. That you might be getting awareness, knowledge, etc. Obviously, anytime we build knowledge, we're probably building awareness as well. But if knowledge is the goal, we would typically write that as the learning need rather than writing it as an awareness need. Does that help a little bit? Yeah, Megan. Let's see. Do I have to give you some? Oh, okay, great. You were just saying thumbs up. All right. No worries. Okay, so this is great. In this particular, and Chao Wang, I'm sorry, I don't know which of these is your first name and which is your family name. So if you want to let me know so I can address you accurately, I would appreciate that. So yes, it's interesting here because you have an audience for your training, but then your trainees have an audience. So your training audience is librarians, but you're going to be asking the librarians to think about readers. Okay. And so you would only have one audience for your training because the audience for your training are the participants in your training. But you're doing a little bit like I am today, right? You all are my participants, but you are planning for your own participants. Okay. Louisa, excellent. I love this topic. It's so important and so necessary. So this is a target audience of school principals and mostly trying to raise awareness and help develop attitudes. Excellent. Excellent. So here's great examples of how our training can be focused in very different ways, depending on the topic, the audience, their background. Louisa's folks are newly appointed, right? Very different than maybe if we were dealing with principals who had been in place for 20 years and maybe had positive attitudes, but we wanted to see them start doing something, right? Great. These are excellent examples, and let's keep them coming as we go through this. So we have done the needs part. We've said, okay, here's what our audience needs from our training, but now we have to figure out how we're going to actually carry this off. Okay. So there's just some real basic logistics we have to think about. What's the mode of this training that you're going to be offering? Is it going to be in person? Is it going to be online? Is it going to be both? And how long is it going to be? Now, for today, I said we're going to focus on a 60 or 90-minute session. That session might be part of something that's bigger. But just to keep it as focused today, we're going to just think about a 60 to 90-minute session. Taka, excellent. So you're trying to build some actual skills here. How do librarians train visually and impaired and blind users on information searching? So that starts to tell us, I have to think, do my librarians in this training already know about the difficulties of searching? Do they have any pedagogical background? We have to think about those things when we start developing this training. Excellent. So hopefully your delivery parameters here weren't too difficult to choose. Are you going to see people in person? If so, are you going to also see them online? Or are you only going to see them online like we are now? And then the training session that you're designing, is it 60 or 90 minutes? Carolyn, yes, if you would focus in on just one of the 60-minute sessions, that'd be great. I realize your learning outcomes might be a little broader because you might be thinking of them across all the sessions, and we can flex with that. Great, great. So Anna's rushing ahead here, so this is great. This is starting to get to the content, and we'll go ahead and see what we can do with that. So let's go ahead. Mohammed, I see you making a comment just to me. You might want to change to everyone so they can see your comments that online is the best mode for 90 minutes. And again, this might also depend on your audience. If your trainee participants are elderly people in your community who are served by a public library and you are training them to use email, online might not be the best mode because they are being trained in basic technology skills, and having to attend training on basic technology using a more advanced technology might be a barrier for them. But if you're training professional librarians or other people who regularly use technology in their work, then of course online is a real opportunity for you. So for those of you who are delivering anything online, so if you're not delivering online, you can just sort of not think about this. Are you going to do this online training synchronously, i.e. where the trainer and the participants are together online? And if so, what's your platform? Is it going to be Zoom, Teams, WebEx, something else? And then for the asynchronous, are you going to be using some sort of learning management system like Canvas or Basecamp, or very common for associations, which is why I put it on here, Higher Logic Thrive? Are you going to be just using email and listservs? And that might be part of what you're using, or something else. You might have another platform that you're using. So, okay. So Anna's planning to use Zoom. Mohammed's situation is that Teams is the best approach. So again, this is where we have to think about our audience, what technology is going to be easy for them, what is ubiquitous, what is available to people. Okay. So we're kind of working through some real logistics here, but they're pretty important to know because not all of these platforms have the same affordances. There are things we can do in Zoom that you cannot do in WebEx. There are things you can do in Teams that you can't do in Zoom. So it's just all dependent on the technology people have access to, as well as what features you need in order to do the training. Or perhaps there's some sort of standard that exists within your organization, so you don't really have a choice, which certainly is often the case for many of us, I know, in our workplaces as well. All right, now we're going to flip our learning needs into making a statement that phrases them as the goals for the training. Now, some of you seem to instinctually do this. You took the need and then you wrote it as a goal, which is great. That's fantastic. Other folks find it easier first to think about a need and then to rephrase it as a learning goal. And I'm going to recommend that you use this format for writing your learning goals. So, considering my learner needs and the delivery parameters, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 6 weeks, whatever. After attending this training, participants will be prepared to do something or have an understanding, identify, apply, by some subcategories of activities. Now, when it's written this way, something by components, it's hard to see this. So I'm going to show you the outcomes that we might have. And I've just written some, okay? I'm not suggesting these are your outcomes. I'm just giving you some examples. So just to go back, you see that the something there was in bold. So the first thing I've done is I've written a set of somethings. Like after attending this workshop, participants will be prepared to effectively create and manage metadata, provide exceptional customer service, create annotated bibliographies, write literature reviews, provide accurate and helpful responses to library user research questions. So that's the thing that they're going to be able to do. How they're going to be able to do it, I've added now in this slide. So you can see you're going to effectively create and manage metadata by applying metadata schemes, mapping metadata elements across standards, and ensuring accurate and consistent resource description. A given workshop can have just one learning goal. You don't have to have 2, 3, 5. You also can have more than one. Provide exceptional customer service by assisting patrons with borrowing, account management, and information inquiries, and using effective communication and problem-solving skills. Create annotated bibliographies by accurately citing scholarly sources using required citation styles and managing references with citation tools. Okay, so you see the pattern here. They're going to be able to do something, and here's the components of that doing. So this one's going to take us a little bit more time. But this is what I want you to do for your training is identify up to 3 learning goals, but just one is also fine. So 1 to 3 learning goals for your 60 to or 90-minute session. So this is the format, something by these components. I'm going to go back to the previous slide because I think having examples is helpful. And you can still see the format here because we've got the bold and then the components not in bold. So we're definitely going to pause for a few minutes here to give you time to draft those learning goals. And I'll be watching the chat. So if you have questions as we work through this, let's go ahead and ask those and see what we can do for a dialogue. I can also offer that if anyone wants to speak on the mic, I can promote you to a panelist so that you can speak. Okay, Mohammed. Good job with getting some content here. But what you phrased it here is what the teacher will be doing, what the trainer will be doing. The trainer will be introducing AI tools for researchers. The trainer will be explaining how the tools are useful, and the trainer will be teaching how to use the tools. Okay. So let's just make a slight tweak in those. And the second two are easy to tweak, right? Learners will be able to explain how the tools will be useful for research. And then users will be able to use the tools for research activities. But what about this very first one of introduce the tools? What is the learner supposed to get out of introducing, when the trainer introduces the tools? They're supposed to be able to identify the characteristics of AI tools. They're supposed to understand what an AI tool is. They should be able to define an AI tool. I'm just offering you options here. So we want the participant to be the actor when we write a training goal, because it's what the learner is supposed to get out of what the trainer is doing. So just a little tweak. Okay, Carolyn's got one here. All right. I think this is good because what you've got here, Carolyn, is you've got the component, which is that they should be able to engage Spanish speakers in their library. Okay. And how should they be able to do that? Well, they should be able to apply or use basic Spanish vocabulary and apply cultural competency. So I think you've got it. You've got something that they're going to do, and then you've got two components of doing it. Okay. Great. Okay. Neela or Nile, I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Okay, so you are going to train the library head about change management. Are you going to want them to be able to define change management? Are you going to want them to be able to identify the steps in change management? Do you want them to be able to create a plan for implementing a change management process? All of those would be possible learning outcomes within the context of change management. Okay. All right. Oh, I see you went on here. I'm sorry, I didn't notice that. Okay, yes, so they will avoid resistance. Okay, yeah. They will manage change by making use, exactly. Great, great. Okay, yeah, sorry, I missed that you had that second set there. Great. You guys are doing wonderful with this. Trying to really break it up for you into like the difference between identifying the topic and then thinking about what people are supposed to learn. And then eventually we're also going to think about, okay, then what's the trainer going to be doing? All right. Let's see. Improve librarians okay, so that's the theme. They want to improve librarians anti-fraud awareness. And the goals, okay, help them to improve their anti-fraud knowledge and identify anti-fraud schemes. Okay, so that's definitely what the trainer will be doing. We just want to tweak that number one just a little bit, Chao Wang, to say that they will be able to identify anti-fraud schemes by using established frameworks, looking for known markers of fraud. Same thing here with number two. You have what the trainer is going to do, that the trainer is going to teach them to use the anti-fraud tools. And we want to make that a statement about what the learner will be able to do. The learner will be able to apply anti-fraud tools. Okay. This is tricky because we kind of have to get our head like turned in another direction in order to phrase this as what the learners are supposed to get out of the training. Okay. So Louisa, great. Okay. So again, I think we just got to tweak these a little bit. So the learning goals here, they would actually learn during the session. So they would be able to discuss the correlation between a functioning school library and student learning outcomes. They would be able to identify, um, they would be able to articulate the value of a school library. They would take steps to enhance the school library. They would invest in the school library. Great, great. We're getting there. Okay, so you've got the topics that is being taught, and we just need to flip them to what they're going to learn. And we need that strong verb at the beginning of what they're going to be able to do. Like in our examples here, create and manage, provide, write, provide. Got some repeats here. Okay, excellent. Yes, Megan, great. So you kind of flipped the what they'll do by what they'll do, and it's fine this way. So they will effectively communicate, facilitate community work, and manage project outputs by using Basecamp tools. So I wonder, so that's great. You just have more things that the things they'll be able to do because you're really focused in on the Basecamp tools. You could make this more specific, like they will effectively communicate using the discussion boards, but I think that would probably be overkill in your statement. So I think the way you've got it, Megan, and then Jerome sounds great. Anna, okay, you're definitely pushing ahead here to the let's see, we've got some be able to use Fred data and the Excel to visualize the results as a map, use the results to assist analysis, identify patterns, and answer basic questions. All right, great. You've got those strong verbs in there. Okay. So yeah, we're doing really well. Sorry, I'm also responding on the fly here, which I think is really important in this kind of training, but it takes me a little bit of time to read and think through your examples, especially since I am not an expert in everything that you are training about. So the big key is with the goals for the training, we want to focus on what people will be able to do after the training. We're going to get to what the trainer is going to do. All right. Just watching the chat here. All right. I am going to suggest that we take about a 3-minute break just because we should all probably get up from our computers and stretch. Online learning is hard on the body. And also just, we've been working really hard intellectually, and so we want to give our brains a break. So I don't think this implementation of Zoom has the timer in it. So I will just start a little timer for us, and you'll hear the chime in 3 minutes, and be ready to come back and join the group. Hey. Excellent. We should all have gotten a little bit of a break there and get a chance to reset our bodies, re-engage our minds. Would highly recommend that if you're ever doing training for even 90 minutes, it's nice to take just a small break in the middle of it, especially if it's online. So we've got our training goals. Oh, Louise, I see you've added some additional ones here. Some very specific things that you're sort of hoping to see as far as behaviors. Join a school library network, secure funds for professional development for library staff. Excellent. Excellent. Some very specific goals that you're working towards here for your folks as far as their attitudes and commitments. Great. Okay, the other thing we want to think about, given what we now know about learning theory and constructivism, which is that people learn new information and they fit it with what they already know. So how is that going to happen? They're going to have to engage with the information. Now, there's ways to engage when you're hearing a lecture. You can be very active taking notes. But you're going to have to be doing something as the learner in order to learn. So the trainer isn't the one doing the learning. The trainer is creating a learning environment that fosters active learning. And active learning, at its most general statement, are instructional activities that involve students or learners doing things and thinking about what they're doing. So we want to keep in mind both that there is an opportunity for people to be actively doing something during the training session, but also an opportunity for them to reflect upon what they're doing. There's quite a lot of research that shows that doing things helps with learning, but thinking about what you've just done is even more effective and solidifies that learning during the learning process. So I already mentioned lecture, and that's certainly a very common training method, and you're certainly experiencing that today, right? So there's kind of 5 main training methods that I see used within the library and information science field. These are also very common to other fields as well. Some fields use some more than others. So lecture, but also demonstration, where you show people how to do something. So demonstrations often used for skills. Lectures often used for knowledge. Discussion. Discussion is often used for developing attitudes and deepening knowledge. Guided practice, i.e., I showed you how to do something. Now you go ahead and do it within the safety of the classroom where you can get some feedback. And of course, reflection, thinking about what you have just done. Now, in the last hour, you have experienced all of these teaching methods. It's very clear that I'm lecturing. But I have also been showing you, demonstrating, giving you examples like we just had of the learning outcomes. Here are examples you can look at. So that was a demonstration. Our discussion here is happening in the chat, so it's maybe not quite as dynamic as it would be in person, but we're making it work. And of course, we have been doing guided practice all along. And I have given you a worksheet or a set of prompts in the slides to help you with that guided practice. We will still have a chance for reflection as well. I've been sort of prompting a little bit of reflection, but we have more of that kind of reflective prompt happening later in the training here today. But I just wanted to point out that it's not difficult to use multiple methods in a training session. And as I said, in the last hour, you've experienced all of these. Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that, Louisa. And thank goodness for Google Translate. It'll also help me see what is there. So especially for people who are Italian speakers or readers, this sounds like it's a really great source. So I've given you a chart here in this slide. Sort of like for each method, what's the primary purpose that it is used for? And examples of its usefulness. So again, I think, lecture is a very efficient mechanism to deliver information to an audience, especially a large audience. We haven't talked yet about how many people you might be training. We have 19 people with us here today. This would be a very different sort of experience if we had 100 people with us today. I probably wouldn't be able to have 100 people commenting in the chat, for example. We'd have to have a different design. So it's really useful for introducing new concepts, providing foundational knowledge, or explaining complex ideas in a structured way. Okay. So that's a good use of lecture. Demonstration is showing how to do a task or apply a concept. And it's very effective for skill-based learning when you want people to be able to see how something is done. Or we might call it procedural learning. And it's particularly helpful before people have to try it themselves, that they can see an example. Discussion is primarily used to encourage dialogue, critical thinking, and sharing ideas among participants. And it's very good for active engagement, deepening understanding, and fostering collaborative learning among those with different perspectives. So again, depending on your topic, you might have different aspects of this that you're focused on for discussion, for lecture, for all of these things. Guided practice is helpful for students to learn to apply their skills in a context where they have instructor support. And obviously this builds skills, but it also helps build confidence because you immediately get feedback, and you get feedback in a lower stakes environment. You're not doing it on the job yet. And reflection encourages learners to think about their experiences and connect their learning to personal or professional contexts. And it helps foster self-awareness, critical thinking again, and it helps a lot with retention, where people actually remember what they learned. Okay. So let me give you a moment to think about which of these training methods do you think you would anticipate using in the workshop that you're developing? You need to use at least one, but I suspect most of you will use at least 2 or 3. Nyla, yes, absolutely. It's possible to use them all in a 90-minute session. Louisa, I'm not sure what you mean by including workshop. Do you want to say a little bit more about that? Okay, Jerome, great question. In the demonstration, only the trainer is doing the thing. They are showing how it is done. In guided practice, the learners, the trainees, are doing the thing. They are often combined, which may be part of the confusion here. It is often the case that the instructor does something and then the learners do it immediately after. And of course, these can even be used simultaneously, with the instructor doing a step, then the learners doing the step, the instructor doing the next step, the learners doing the next step. But you are absolutely correct that they are often used very closely together. Okay, it looks like there's a lot of demonstration, guided practice, time for reflection. Okay. Great. So by then a workshop, Louisa, do you mean guided practice where people would take time to go ahead and practice the skill they're developing? That's what I'm not clear when you say workshop. What would the learners be? Okay, guided practice. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, and in your case, you'll have to sort of think about what is the skill they're developing versus the knowledge that they're building. And with some of the commitments you're trying to get these principals to make, you might consider whether discussion might be helpful as a way of sharing knowledge among the principals so that they can support each other's learning. Great. Excellent. Okay, so we all have a lot of experience with these training methods because we have been trained. We have experienced all of these. And so we also know just from our own experience that some of these are more engaging than others. And in particular, lecture is not always as engaging. And so when we get to thinking about the session, one of the things we're going to want to think about is when the instructor is lecturing or demonstrating, which are instructor focused methods, what do we want the learners to be doing? Do we want them to be taking notes? Do we want them to be drawing a picture of what they are hearing? What is it that we want the learners doing when the instructor is, if you will, in performance mode, either lecturing or demonstrating? So something we just want to think a little bit about when we get to sort of laying out the session. We're going to think about what's the instructor doing during this time, and then what's the learner doing. Same is true for discussion, for example. What's the instructor role during discussion? What's the learner role during discussion? Okay, so we've got a lot of guided practice and reflection. Great. Okay. And again, all of these methods are good methods. It's a matter of choosing the method for the content and the audience that you're teaching. Let's also talk about the fact that you will probably create some supplemental learning materials. And by this, I don't mean the materials that you use to, say, present. I suppose presentation slides should probably be on here because I think we're almost always doing some sort of slides. But we also want to think about whether we're going to ask people to do any readings. We can't guarantee they will do the readings, but looking at some of your topics, it might be very useful to assign even a 2 to 3 page reading that you ask them to do before they come to the training. Or is there a video that you'd like them to watch before they come to the training? Is there something you want them to read or watch after the training? Or do you even want them to read or watch something during the training? So things to think about there. There's also any handouts that you might want to create. And those might be summaries of points that you're making. If it's a detailed procedure, it might be a job aid that details all the steps. And maybe you want to make a worksheet, not unlike what I've given you here today, which is doesn't tell you the answers, but gives you places to write your own answers. And in doing so, helps support you in what's the important things to be focusing on. So these are some of the things that you would need to think about for your training. And we might want to just look again. I've made a chart here for, is this? I think these we probably have a better sense of, but why might you want to use them? Readings are a way to give a lot more information, detail, and depth than you could ever provide in a lecture. Um, it might also be that you just want to provide them for people who are very motivated and want to read more. Videos can be very helpful, especially if it's a procedure. So you kind of get a demonstration by video. Handouts are typically something that people are going to keep as a reference point, something they're going to go back to. And then, of course, worksheets are going to be more of helping with application, active learning, monitoring their own learning. Okay, so Demilar, you are thinking about guided practice and reflection, and a worksheet matches up so well to guided practice, right? Because it gives people the steps and it gives you also a way of seeing on the worksheet how they're doing. Great. So let me just see what you all think about the learning materials that you might consider using. Anyone else want to share any of the learning materials you're thinking of? Okay. Flashcards makes good sense, Carolyn, with what you're planning to train on. Okay. Which we could kind of say is a type of handout, but I think calling it out as a very specific tool there makes very good sense. Okay, Chris, yeah, the Google form, great, great. Louisa, no problem. Thanks for letting me know. Understand. Okay, so Mohammed's not sure if videos are right for his group. Okay. Okay. So Megan, you're really thinking of sort of reinforcement videos that people can go back to. And these are kind of a video that's almost in the version of a handout in some ways then. Learning materials is one of the most difficult things to sort of chunk up into categories of things. So yeah, great. Great. Yeah. All right, so really creative answers here. This is great. I should probably put an other on the form so you can just add things like the flashcards and the like. All right, great. So different things working well for different groups, depending what the topic is, etc. So here is the putting it all together moment. Our sessions need a script. It's literally a chart. This period of time, here's what the trainer's doing, here's the learner activity, and here's the materials that we need, and then any notes you might have. And we just also want to really think carefully about our opening or our introduction, any transitions we need to make among topics, and then making sure we have a conclusion. So it literally looks like this. It's a chart and you fill it out. Minutes 1 through 3. Trainer's role is to introduce the session, welcome everyone, and state the learning goals. The learner activity is to review the handout and take notes. And the learner materials might be the printout of the PowerPoint slides. So you've just got this going through sort of seeing everyone, all of the topics that you're working through. We are not going to have time to do that in today's workshop, but this is what I would highly recommend you do so that you always know you've got two groups of people, well, probably one trainer and then multiple learners, but they have different roles through the entire training. And what are they supposed to be doing as the session progresses? So during some of this training here today, I would, say my role is I'm giving a lecture on a given topic, and your role is to be listening and taking notes if you want. And then we have a next session, which is guided practice, where my role is to prompt you to apply what I just discussed and then be quiet. And then your role is to apply. And then we move into a little bit of discussion. I mean, we're going through this cycle really quickly here. So we're repeating this, right? Mini lecture, mini guided activity, mini discussion, time and time again here. We have the same material for the entire time, which is your worksheet. All right. So that's like what we've planned to do. So in this, a miracle has occurred and you have a whole script. In real life, you actually have to make that script. But we're going to want to start to think then about how are we going to document our activities as trainers and evaluate the effectiveness of the training. So coming back to our big picture of program design for activities and outputs, this is where we document the amount of things. Okay, so we document how many trainings we offered, 1 60-minute session, 2 repeat sessions of the same workshop of 60 minutes, right? Just how many trainings did we offer? And for each of those trainings, how many people participated and how many trainers were there? So this documents the activities that the trainers did and the outputs, which is the number of people who attended the training. It's not the most robust data, but it is very common performance data where a library says, okay, here's what we've done, and here's how many people took part. I'm going to assume this is data that you probably collect very routinely, and it's not surprising to say that we would collect data on how many things, people, trainers, trainings, etc. We also want to think, though, about do we want to collect any data about the reaction people have to the training? And the reactions people have to the training, we can ask them about all kinds of different reactions they have to the training. These are just 8 examples of the kinds of things that we could ask people their reactions. And on this next slide, I've gone ahead and defined them for you. So we can ask, how satisfied are you with the training? Okay. Now, people can be very satisfied and it still not be effective. So this doesn't really tell us if the training was effective. It tells us how the training was perceived. It was perceived as satisfactory, perceived as relevant, the extent to which the content was applicable to what people perceived their needs to be. Did they perceive the training to be clear and well organized? Was it interactive and engaging? How effective was the trainer in their communication, knowledge, and ability to foster learning? Was the training accessible, including logistics and platform usability? Do the training participants believe that the training is valuable? And do they have any suggestions for improvement? And on the right-hand side, you see examples of the questions we can ask to get people's reactions based on their perceptions. Now, it's very valuable to get people's reactions to training, because we do want people to be happy with our training and we want them to perceive it as valuable. So we might be asking them these perceptions, but these perceptions won't tell us quite whether they actually learned anything. So we're going to have another step in designing our evaluation, which is to figure out, well, how can we figure out if people actually learn something? But let's think about, for the training you're designing, are there any reactions that you would like to capture in some sort of instrument with respect to the perceptions participants have about any of these 8 elements, or any other elements that you might think of? Thoughts on what you might want to capture as far as reactions or perceptions? Okay. So Carolyn's picked out 5 here: relevance, clarity, accessibility, perceived value, and suggestions for improvement. Great. And again, all of these are perfectly legitimate things to inquire about. You probably don't want to wear your learners out by asking them about everything every time. And so we might particularly think about those things that are either particularly important to us, or that we are concerned about. So if we're concerned about whether our training is as clear and understandable as possible, we might ask about clarity. If we're particularly concerned about the way training participants see the value of the training, then we might ask about that. Nyla, yes, at the end, when you submit your form, because you've put in your email, it will email you the form and you'll have all of your answers, as well as the ability to go back and revise them if you want. Yeah, Carolyn, that's the thing. We really also have to respect our trainees' time and how much we're asking of them. So sometimes I also think it's helpful, if we're going to do our same workshop multiple times, maybe we ask different groups, different things. Maybe one year we just focus in on a couple aspects, that sort of thing. So, and some of these things, maybe we say, like, maybe accessibility is really important to us, but there are other ways to look at the accessibility of our training, using, say, a rubric that we would ask a third party to apply. And so maybe we don't ask that of our trainees. Really your choice. But good to see. So good. Excellent. So I see you picking out different aspects of this. Now, as I said, the biggest issue here is that gets us to satisfaction, it gets us to perceptions, but it doesn't tell us if we actually achieved our outcomes. So I want to, we're moving along to outcomes here, and to look at our outcomes, we're going to go back to our training goals. Whatever we put as, the thing people were supposed to gain, right? The ability to do metadata, provide excellent customer service, whatever your something was, that's what they're supposed to be able to do. And that's what we need to find out if they can actually do. Because our training's effectiveness has to do with whether our participants are learning. And so we need to go back and say, okay, what kind of evaluation can we do that tells us whether they actually learned something? And here we're going to go back to say, okay, what is it that we were going with for learning so we can figure out how to evaluate it? And this kind of evaluation is known as authentic assessment. So we have different kinds of learning that we've talked about, like knowledge acquisition, skill development, attitude or behavior change, application of learning, retention of learning, transfer to work setting. These are different things that we could be looking at with respect to learning. So we've got a definition here of each of these aspects of learning. And then in this chart, some examples of how you can authentically measure whether that kind of learning has occurred. So if you want to know if people have developed skills, you need to give them a performance task where you can observe them applying those skills. If you want to know if people know something, you can use a quiz or a test or some other pre and post training assessment. So we have to match our evaluation choice to our training outcome. If we want to know if they are, for example, actually doing something on the job, that third one, attitude or behavior change, we have to be able to look into the future at some point and do our assessment outside of the training session, right? So if we're going to transfer to the work setting, that's our goal, then we have to be able to look at work products from the work setting in order to know if our training worked. So different things call for different kinds of evaluations. Now, maybe for the purpose of your training at this point, you are just going to look at something that you can look at during the training session, which are those first four. The last two, retention and transfer to work, cannot be evaluated during the training session itself. They have to be evaluated at a different point in time in the future. But in the moment, you could ask people to take a quiz or to do a task, write a reflective statement, do some sort of problem-solving exercise. So what are you thinking about as far as what you would want your training program's evaluation plan to focus on? Do you want to focus on something that you can evaluate during the training session? That's going to be one of those first four. Do you want to focus on sort of more long-term application and retention? Then you're going to be choosing one of the last two. You could also be doing both. You could be doing a skill development assessment during the training session, as well as then an observation of a work product later. So what are you thinking as far as the evaluation plan you might like to build for your session? Okay, application of learning. Okay, so are you thinking some sort of problem-solving exercise then, Damolar? My apologies if I'm not saying your name correctly. Okay, Megan, you're going to do skill development during the training. So some sort of practice task that you can watch people, because obviously they're not going to be able to apply it over the long term if they can't do it when they leave the training. So, okay. Okay, Carolyn, yours being asynchronous is definitely a little bit of a challenge. So you're going to focus in on those things that can be done during the training session because you don't have any sort of follow-up that you can do. Completely legitimate. We have to work with the environment that we have. Okay. All right. So Chris, I'm happy to provide an example and I'd be happy to even try and make it specific to your situation. Um, are you having people develop a skill or knowledge or? Okay, no problem. I'll just watch for you to type it in there. So the application of learning is sort of asking people to do something not on the job is one thing I can say is it's applying what has been learned to some sort of example that is provided by the instructor in the sense of you might have a role play or a case study or some sort of problem solving exercise, often that people would work through in a group. And so the application of learning as described here is what's done during a training session. Whereas if you were wanting to say, okay, we had a scenario-based assessment because we were doing customer service training. And we wanted to see like, okay, we believe they've developed some skills and now we want them to apply their customer service training to a scenario in which a library user issues a complaint. And so we could say, well, which of the strategies that we've role played in our performance-based task would you apply here? And then an on-the-job assessment would be waiting for a moment where there is a patron complaint and seeing whether they use those skills again in the workplace itself. Okay. Assist their community in developing a digital archive program statement. Okay. So application, I think that you could do during such a training session, Chris, would be to have developed some sort of case study that you present to the learners during the training session, which is an example community, for example. Looking at their archiving needs and who should be involved in the decision-making process. And so you would then play through that case study during the workshop, and that would be an example of can they apply the content that maybe you've delivered in a lecture to this case study. So that would be during the session. The transfer to the work setting would be to ask them, and this is always the challenge of things that get assessed after, is you would ask them to submit to you the program statement that they developed, as well as a description of the process that they used. And that would be a transfer to work setting evaluation of the learning. So not can they do it to this case study that you've developed that they apply in the session, but when they go into the world, can they actually execute on that same process? Many times people like to do both, right? Because they want to make sure that people have actually gained the skills during the training so that they have a fighting chance of being able to do it in the workplace. If you don't assess during the training whether they can do it, and then it turns out that they can't apply it, you have a harder time knowing, well, did they just not learn it during the workshop, or did something else interfere with their ability to execute in the workplace setting? This is great. I think it really helps us to work through like examples of this because what I'm presenting to you here is very abstracted since it has to apply to any topic somebody in the library and information science field might want to train on. Yeah. And Chris, you're absolutely right. I mean, in what you just described, it sounds like something that's bigger than just a single 90-minute session. It's multiple 90-minute sessions or the like. Okay, Anna, good examples here. Checks for understanding, performance-based tasks, and maybe some sort of survey. Okay, great. One thing I like to remind myself always is that larger training programs are built out of smaller blocks. So even if it's a semester-long class I'm teaching in the library school at Illinois, every week is a 2-hour class period. Every 2-hour class period is made up of 2 60-minute sessions. Every 60-minute session is made up of 3 20-minute blocks. So I'm always breaking it down to the 20-minute block and then building up, whether it's to a 60-minute session, a 90-minute session, 6 sessions, a whole semester. So everything can always be broken down into these building blocks. And it's a little artificial to always be thinking in 20-minute segments, but if you think in 20-minute segments, it's actually one of the most effective tools I can give you for improving your training, is to think about it in 20-minute blocks. And it's nice because it's also a simple rule or guideline to use. All right. Now, all of this, remember, was to serve a need. There was some need in the community for people to be applying these skills, having this knowledge, etc. What was it? What amazing thing is now going to happen if Chris's folks can develop a digital archive program statement? What amazing thing is going to happen if the need is met? And that is the impact claim. The training was offered to meet participant needs. And because the need is met, here is the bigger picture impact. So if we needed customer service training and then people provide better customer service, what's the impact? The impact is that library users have a more positive experience with the library and are more likely to support the library. If they're able to better use Excel, and I'm sorry, I don't know what Fred actually is, but if they're better able to use Fred, what's going to happen for them? They're going to be more efficient. They're going to be more productive, right? Like, what's the bigger impact that's going to happen? And why this is important is because if you are needing to get resources to offer your training, that's typically what the person you're asking for resources is going to care about, is the impact. I'm going to teach people these things. And because I teach them these things, they'll be able to have this knowledge or skills or ability. And because they have this knowledge, skills, or ability, something amazing will happen. What is that amazing thing? So I want to hear, what's your amazing thing that you're driving towards? This one's a hard one sometimes. Okay. So Carolyn's goal is her users. The training of her staff, the library staff, will improve library staff work. But the reason we care about improving that library staff work is because of the impact it's going to have on library users. Okay, so because Chris's folks can make this program statement, they're going to be able to develop community archives projects, which include oral histories, and in his case, with some partners in African communities. Okay, excellent. All right, very specific goal. If we do this training and we get the people doing these skills and these abilities, we're going to see better funding for libraries. Great. All right. These are great, wonderful things. All right, Mila. Yeah. Okay. So if we can manage the change, then it'll just be a better workplace environment. And obviously it's better for our patrons, it's better for our staff. Okay. So and so we'll be prepared for future changes. Megan, wonderful. Yes, the goal here of all of this base camp work, right, is to mean that they can be more efficient and effective in achieving the goals of their projects. Fantastic. Okay. All right. And Mohammed, the library will be a marketing resource. Okay, great. All right. So this is the thing we want to think about, especially if after we do all of this design, there's two things that this will help us. I mean, there's multiple things this helps us with. Obviously, we've got a better training design. Our training is more likely to be effective when it's well designed and thought through. Secondly, as somebody mentioned earlier, maybe it was Mohammed, when we're clear on these things, we can better market the training and get people to come to it because it's much clearer what they're going to gain by coming to the training. And then thirdly, if we need to either ask for funding or report on the use of funding, our ability to articulate the impact of the training creates a compelling story, and it aligns with the priorities of those who have invested in the training. Okay. All right, great. So in Anna's case, they will sort of they'll be able to use this as a resource. Okay, great. And it looks like in Anna's case, maybe one marker of the effectiveness of her training is she is going to use another kind of evaluation, which is, do people come back? Do they come back for more training or more help? Great. All right, we're doing really well here. I want to put this back up because this is ultimately program design, program evaluation of any type, but especially for training. This can be so helpful for us to think through. Okay, so Bertilda is saying that the outcome will be libraries will be confident in providing researcher support. Excellent. Okay, great. We can even think of like, because they're more confident, they will, engage in outreach, more people will use their services, like lots of good things will happen from that. So in our remaining minutes here, I want to, with this slide up, um, ask for, really open the floor for specific questions about specific things we discussed, or, big picture questions, questions about topics we didn't talk about, things that are on your mind at this point. And so what I'm going to suggest we do is you take a minute to just reflect on the training here today, what you've learned, what's been useful, areas you want to think more about, questions you have. So let's go ahead and just take a moment for a little bit of reflection, and then we'll have some additional discussion. Okay, so what is on people's minds? And if you'd like to speak on the mic, if you want to let me know that, I can give you mic access. But it's also fine if you just want to type in the chat. What kind of questions or additional observations are going through your mind at this point? Okay, great, Nyla. Um, it's always good when someone describes training as fun. So, yeah, I think really chunking it down into these 20-minute things is so helpful, because it also helps us we can get really overwhelmed, especially if we're designing training that's like 5 or 10 hours of training. It can be really overwhelming to think about that much time. But when you start thinking about it as just a lot of little chunks of time, it can be much easier to sort of build it up, almost like a Legos. So, oh, Carolyn, that's always the challenge, isn't it? So the one thing I can say there with this question of how to keep ourselves focused is, you might be able to talk faster, but they can't learn any faster. And this is a mistake I see trainers make many, many times, which is they try to talk faster as a way of having more learning happening. And it actually decreases the learning because people don't have time to take it in. So I think to really try and say, what are my goals? And does every piece of content I'm delivering come to those goals? So yeah, Muhammad, this is a great, I certainly hope no one is doing 7 or 8 hours of training on Zoom in one day. Um, definitely a lot of breaks, but if I were doing 7 or 8 hours of training, I would say like, oh, in person. Yeah. So then I would be saying, all right, we probably have a lunch break. So I've really got two halves. And then probably in each half, we're going to have a break. So essentially, I have 4 90-minute sessions. And in 4 90-minute sessions, I have 4 to 5 20-minute sessions. And so I break it down that way. Probably break it down into the 4 90 minutes and then plan each 90-minute session. So I know, even though things are scheduled till the top of the hour, a lot of us have to go from one place to another. And so what I want to do now is just give you one more activity to do that I'm going to ask for you to do for me. Not surprisingly, in a training about training. We want to do some evaluation. And one of the evaluations I want is your perceptions of this training. And I'd really value, it's a very short evaluation form. I tried to make it as short as possible. So make sure you've submitted your worksheet so you get your answers emailed to you. But also, if you would fill out that evaluation form, I would be most grateful. I have 2 more instances of this workshop to do, so I even have a chance to improve based on any feedback you might be providing to me this morning, morning my time. So great. Thank you also for all your very kind comments in the chat. I'm glad today was useful. As somebody who spent 30 minutes in 30 years in library instruction, it's really gratifying to be able to apply my skills this way. Juliet, great question. Yeah, this does take some practice and some time. So you're training record management of AV archives with the target audience being records managers and archivists. So these are people who already have some knowledge, right? And you want them to kind of develop a specialized area of understanding relative to the management of specifically AV archives. So what are the components of managing AV archives? And I don't know personally anything about managing AV archives, but I can imagine there might be some knowledge they need to gain or skills they need to gain in policy formulation, maybe in sort of the preservation and housing of AV materials. And maybe this might be more a policy issue again, but parameters for user access and service. I don't totally know the topic, so it's hard for me to discuss this in details. But the reason we might care, the ultimate impact of good management of AV archives would presumably be that these archives are available for future generations to use and benefit from. That's just off the top of my head, Juliet, so we could certainly talk more if you want about that. So I know we are now into the 10 minutes for the hour magic point. So what I'm going to do is call this to an end and stop the recording, but I'll be happy to stay online for a few more minutes if people want to talk one-on-one. But let's bring this to a formal close at this point. Thank you so much for attending today and all of your excellent engagement. You've really done amazing work in these 2 hours, and I hope it's going to be helpful to you in your own workplace settings.